Why was she the only one awake when the radio crackled at 3:00 a.m.? The others were asleep, sprawled in their bunks, their breathing heavy, steady. She sat upright on the edge of hers, boots on, uniform wrinkled, staring at the shadows stretching across the barracks floor. The sound startled her, but she didn't move right away. She only listened. A low voice on the radio, static, then silence. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. Not from fear, she told herself, but from the weight of it all. From the weight of being here. From the uniform she wore, pressed against her skin like an identity she hadn't fully earned. They didn't look at her the same way they looked at each other. She had seen it during the briefing when her name was called and a chair scraped on the floor as she took her seat. Their eyes slid away from her, resting instead on maps, papers, coffee mugs. No one spoke directly to her unless protocol forced them to. They weren't cruel, just distant. And she told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't here for their approval. She was here because of something else. Something she hadn't told them. Not yet. The radio hissed again. Then a single word clipped, urgent. She swallowed, leaning closer. The voice was blurred by static, but the tone was unmistakable, warning. She exhaled quietly and set the radio down. For a moment she thought of waking the others, shaking them from their sleep, telling them what she heard. But she didn't. She just sat there in the dim light, the hum of the ceiling fan circling overhead, the desert wind pressing faintly against the thin walls. Her chest rose and fell. Doubt lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. She wore the uniform, yes, but deep inside, did she belong here? Or was she an outsider they tolerated until the mission forced their hand? The sound of boots echoed in the corridor outside. A door opened, closed. She straightened instinctively. A tall figure appeared at the barracks doorway, Sergeant Hall. He glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You're up," he said, his voice low, almost cautious. She nodded, couldn't sleep. He hesitated, then gave a small grunt. "Get some rest, tomorrow's long." His eyes lingered for a moment, something unspoken there, before he moved on, boots fatting down the hall. When the silence returned, she leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and let herself breathe. A deep, deliberate inhale, a slow exhale. Her hands clenched into fists, then released. She remembered the look in their eyes earlier that evening, uncertain, measuring. She remembered the words unspoken. She had learned to live with silence, to move through it, to carry it like weight training for the soul. And yet, there was a reason she was here. A reason tied not to orders or duty, but to a night years ago when she had stood on a porch and watched red and blue lights flash against her family's walls. When she had heard the sound of breaking glass and her father's voice, trembling. When she had promised herself something that no one else would ever understand. She tightened her jaw. They didn't need to know, not now, not yet. The barracks were too still. She needed air. Rising quietly, she moved past the bunks, her shadow brushing against steel frames until she slipped out into the night. The desert stretched endless, flat under a low-hanging moon. The air was sharp, cold, carrying the faint smell of dust and fuel. She walked slowly, boots crunching gravel, the wind pressing gently against her face. Out here alone, she could breathe easier. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the mission waited, and with it, the test she both dreaded and needed. Behind her, a sound footsteps. She turned. Corporal Diaz stood a few yards away, his jacket half-zipped, hair a mess. He raised a hand in casual acknowledgement. Couldn't sleep either. She gave a small shrug, something like that. He walked closer, hands tucked into his pockets, his eyes scanning the desert. Always the night before, huh? Gets to everyone. His voice carried no edge, only weariness. She didn't answer, just watched him. After a moment he said, quieter, "First time." She hesitated, then nodded. He let out a breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "Doesn't get easier, you just learn how to carry it." His gaze shifted to her, and for the first time it wasn't dismissive. It wasn't skeptical. It was human. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow, everything changes. She nodded again softly. Yeah. When he walked away, she stayed. Stayed until the night chilled her bones and the stars blurred. Tomorrow, the word clung to her like a weight. Tomorrow she would step into the mission. Tomorrow she would prove herself or fall apart. Tomorrow, the silence that defined her might finally break. But there was something else, something she hadn't told them. Not about her past, not about the promise she carried, not about the truth that made her hands steady even as her heart raced. And as the wind carried the sound of a distant hum, rotors, faint, low, moving closer, she knew tomorrow had already begun. The barracks lights flickered once, then steadied. She turned toward the horizon, eyes narrowing. Her uniform felt heavy against her shoulders, but her resolve, buried deep, had already begun to rise. The next morning came harsh, with the desert sun burning through thin curtains and boots hitting the floor in unison. Orders were called, gear checked, rifles slung. She moved through it all silently, methodically, her motions precise, careful. She felt their eyes again, flickering toward her, measuring, doubting. But she kept her face calm, unreadable. She told herself it didn't matter. The transport roared outside, a machine ready to carry them into the unknown. Dust swirled, stinging eyes clinging to skin. She stepped forward, her boots hitting the ramp, the sound swallowed by the engines. Inside, the seats were hard metal, straps hanging loose. She sat, buckled in, her hands resting on her thighs. Across from her, Diaz caught her gaze and gave the smallest nod. It was almost nothing, but to her it meant more than words. The others spoke quietly among themselves, fragments of sentences, jokes that didn't land, tension disguised as humor. She listened but didn't join. She just closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the vibration of the engines through her chest. And she thought of the porch again. The lights, the glass, the voice of her father cut short by silence. A promise made, a debt carried. This was her chance to face it. Her breath steadied, her hands stopped trembling. The mission awaited. But there was still something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Why did her stomach twist every time the engines roared louder? The transport shuddered as it lifted, pressing them back into their seats, the desert below shrinking into patches of tan and shadow. She kept her eyes forward, watching the dull metal interior, listening to the clatter of gear, the low murmur of voices. No one spoke to her, not directly, but she could feel their glances, short and quick, measuring. They didn't doubt her presence, orders had placed her here, but they doubted her worth. She carried that weight quietly. Her headset crackled. The pilot's voice came through, clipped, steady. Approaching AO, 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes until boots on ground. 10 minutes until her silence turned into action. Diaz leaned forward slightly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Stay close. First time out can rattle you. She met his eyes. They were softer now, not testing her, not dismissing, just human. She gave a small nod, nothing more. The sergeant across from them shifted, adjusting his rifle. Sergeant Hall. He didn't look at her, but his words carried to all of them. Remember, civilians first. Intel second. Extraction clean, no mistakes. The others nodded. She nodded too, though Hall hadn't waited for her answer. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. That steadiness surprised her every time. Anxiety in her chest, calm in her fingers. She wondered if that was normal or if it came from what she carried inside. The memory that never left her. The memory she hadn't spoken of, not to them, not to anyone here. The transport dipped suddenly, the horizon tilting. Wind shoved at the fuselage. Someone cursed under their breath. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled, exhaled. The vibration thrummed in her bones. 5 minutes, the pilot said. The ramp lowered slightly, the outside rushing in, a blast of hot air, the roar of rotors echoing against canyon walls. Dust surged in, stinging eyes. She raised a hand against it, squinting into the light. The ground neared. Shapes appeared, stone ridges, scattered shacks, roads etched into sand like scars. The mission, the place she had only seen in briefings, in grainy drone footage, now it was real. "Go," Hall barked. They unbuckled, rifles slung, boots hitting metal. One by one they moved down the ramp into the blast of heat and dust. She followed, boots sinking slightly into loose sand as she hit the ground. The transport lifted again, its roar fading into the distance. Silence pressed in, a silence heavy, watchful. Her squad spread out, scanning, rifles up, eyes sharp. She mirrored them, her own rifle steady in her hands, her breath controlled. The village lay ahead, low walls of clay and stone, narrow alleys twisting like veins. Windows dark, doors shut, nothing moved. Hall raised a fist, the squad halted. He spoke quietly into comms, orders, directions. She listened, absorbing every word. Then they moved. Boots against dirt, metal clinking softly, their shadows long under the unforgiving sun. Her pulse drummed in her ears, but her body knew what to do. Step, scan, breathe. Step, scan, breathe. Training had carved it into her. Still her mind wandered, to the porch, to the night years ago, to the sound of glass breaking, her father's voice shouting, then silenced, to the promise she had made. She blinked hard, focus, not now. A dog barked in the distance, sharp, sudden. Everyone froze. Hall raised his hand again, silent command. They waited, listened, the bark faded. No footsteps, no voices followed, only the wind brushing sand across stone. They moved again. Her eyes flicked across rooftops, shadows, doorways. Every silence felt loaded, every corner a possibility. They reached the first building. Diaz signaled. 2 soldiers moved in, rifles up. Seconds later, clear. She kept her position, eyes scanning, her breath steady. They advanced, building by building, each cleared with precision. But the silence of the village gnawed at them, too still, too empty. She felt it too, a wrongness in the air, like holding your breath before thunder. They stopped at a narrow alley. Hall gestured. She was to move forward, cover left. Her chest tightened. First direct order to her since arrival. She nodded quietly and moved. Boots against stone, rifle steady, eyes sharp. She turned the corner. Movement. A flash in a window. Her rifle rose instinctively, finger brushing trigger. Then she froze. A child, small, thin, staring at her with wide, dark eyes. A ragged shirt, bare feet, frozen in place, holding nothing. Her chest clenched. Behind her, someone whispered, "Contact." She didn't answer. She only shook her head, slow, deliberate. The child vanished from the window. Her breath released in a slow stream. She stepped back, signaling clear. Her hands trembled slightly now, though she forced them still again. Diaz caught her eye briefly. His look said nothing, but it carried weight, recognition. That had been a choice, a human one. They moved on. The sun burned hotter. Sweat trickled under her uniform. The silence stretched. Then a sound. A door creaked open just ahead. Every rifle lifted instantly. She froze in place. An old man stepped out, hands raised, palms open. His beard gray, his clothes worn. His eyes wide with something between fear and surrender. He spoke quickly in his own language, words tumbling, desperate. Hall barked, "Translator." One of the squad stepped forward, listening, nodding. "Says men came through yesterday, armed, took food, took his son, says they're still here." Hall's eyes narrowed. "Where?" The translator spoke again, listened, then pointed, toward the far side of the village. Hall gave a sharp nod. "Move." The old man stayed frozen in place, hands trembling, eyes pleading. She glanced at him once, just once. His eyes locked on hers. Something there struck her, fear, yes, but also a silent plea, as if he saw in her something different than the others, something human, perhaps. She swallowed hard, then looked away. They advanced, every step now heavier, every silence sharper. Her rifle stayed steady, her heart louder. The alleys narrowed, walls closing in, the air thick with dust, shadows deeper. A flicker of movement ahead. Then gunfire. Sharp, deafening, echoing against stone. The squad dropped instantly, rifles snapping up, return fire cracking. Dust and splinters exploded from walls. Shouts filled comms. She hit the ground, heart hammering, breath sharp. The smell of gunpowder burned her nose. Bullets snapped overhead. She pressed against stone, peering out. Figures darted between walls ahead. Armed, faces hard, eyes cold. Her rifle steadied, she exhaled. Fingers squeezed, shot fired, one figure dropped. Her body stayed calm even as her heart raced, training taking over. But in her chest, a different fire burned. Not just survival, not just mission, something older, deeper, a promise she had carried for years. Her squad's voices filled her headset, commands, calls, warnings. The world around her roared. But inside she was silent, steady. She fired again and again. Each shot precise, controlled. The fight surged. And in the chaos she realized this was it. This was where her silence would either define her or shatter. How long can silence last before it breaks? Gunfire roared through the narrow alleys, echoing against walls, magnifying until it felt like the whole village was shaking apart. Dust clouds rose, cutting sightlines, choking lungs. She pressed her shoulder into a cracked wall, the rifle firm in her hands, breath shallow. Every second stretched, every heartbeat louder than the last. Hall's voice cut through the headset. Suppressive fire, move up. Rifles barked in unison. The alley lit with muzzle flashes, shadows dancing across the clay walls. She moved when ordered, low, fast, controlled, boots slipping slightly on loose stone before catching. Her chest ached, but her hands were steady, always steady. A figure darted across an opening ahead. She fired. The man stumbled, fell, silence swallowing his last motion. She didn't flinch, didn't cheer, just moved again, automatic. But inside, the silence cracked. This was her first mission, her first firefight. She should have felt fear, crippling, consuming. Instead, she felt something sharper, something she hadn't wanted to feel again. Rage, a quiet, coiled rage. It carried the memory of her father's last shout, the sound of shattering glass, the promise whispered through clenched teeth that night, never again. Her trigger finger trembled, not with hesitation, but with a memory that burned hotter than the desert sun. Contact left, Diaz shouted. She swung, target, rifle up, breath steady, shot clean. Diaz's voice again, urgent, cover. She leaned, firing bursts, watching him sprint across the alley. Bullets tore stone near his boots, dust exploding. He dove, rolled, came up firing. His shout in comms, clear. Her lungs burned, sweat slid down her spine, but her rifle stayed true. Hall's voice snapped through again. Push forward, secure the hostages. Hostages, the old man's son, maybe others. She swallowed hard. This wasn't just a firefight, it was a rescue. Lives measured against every bullet. They advanced again. Step, fire, breathe. Step, fire, breathe. Her body followed orders. Her mind whispered different words. This is it. This is where you prove them wrong. Because she knew they doubted her. She had seen it in their eyes during briefing, in the silence that circled her at meals, in the way Hall's orders never landed on her directly unless necessary. And she carried that doubt like armor. If they thought she didn't belong, then she would show them otherwise, not with speeches, not with bravado, but with action. Silent, steady action. Another corner, another burst of fire, another sprint through choking dust. Her ears rang, her throat tasted of copper, her chest heaved. And still she moved. They reached a courtyard, wide, open, dangerous. Low walls crumbled at the edges. A well sat in the middle, rope frayed, bucket overturned. Hall raised a fist. The squad froze at the threshold. Silence pressed in. She scanned the edges. Windows black, doorways shadowed, the air too still, too heavy. Then a sound, a cry muffled from inside the nearest building. Hall gestured sharply, 2 soldiers stacked at the door, breach ready. Her heart pounded harder, hostages, children maybe. The order came, breach. Boot slammed door, wood splintered, the squad stormed in, rifles up. Shouts scuffling, then voices not angry, pleading. Moments later, Diaz's voice. Civilians secured, 2, both alive. Relief washed through her chest, brief, fleeting, because the silence outside was wrong, too long, too sharp. She looked up. A figure on the rooftop, rifle aimed. Time slowed. Her breath caught, her finger pulled. Shot cracked. The man collapsed, rifle clattering across stone. Her lungs released. Diaz emerged from the building, guiding 2 figures, an older woman shaking and a boy no older than 12. Their clothes torn, their faces dust-streaked. The boy's eyes wide, terrified, they locked on her. For a second her chest tightened. He could have been. No, she pushed the thought down. Hall's voice, form perimeter, keep them safe. They moved instantly. She took her position, eyes scanning rooftops, alleys, windows, every shadow a threat. Minutes dragged, sweat stung her eyes. The boy whimpered softly, the woman clutching him tight. Then comms crackled, a new voice, the pilot. Be advised, heat signatures inbound, multiple, fast. Hall cursed, how many? Too many. Her stomach sank, too many. That meant more than a firefight, that meant survival itself was a question. Hall barked orders, rapid, clipped. Fortify position, prepare for contact. They moved, dragging debris, flipping tables, stacking stone. Every second mattered. She worked silently, muscles straining, lungs burning. Diaz beside her, muttering curses under his breath. Then gunfire again, louder, closer. Figures poured into alleys, shouts filled the air, bullets screamed. The courtyard erupted. Her rifle bucked against her shoulder, shot after shot. Muzzle flashes lit the shadows. The squad roared back, voices sharp, commanding, desperate. She crouched low, eyes sharp, finger steady. One target, then another, breathing in rhythm with each trigger pull. Dust choked the air. Smoke stung her eyes. Her ears rang until sound blurred into vibration. Diaz shouted something she couldn't hear. Hall's voice broke through, faint, distorted. Hold, hold, reinforcements inbound. But were they? Or was that just another promise spoken into the void? Her chest ached, her throat raw, her hands steady still. And then an explosion. The ground shook, throwing her against the wall. Debris rained down, biting her skin. Smoke swallowed the courtyard. Her vision blurred, ears screamed with ringing. But through it she saw the boy. Crouched, clutching his mother, eyes wide, mouth open in silent scream. Something inside her broke. Not fear, not despair, but memory. The porch, the lights, the silence after the glass shattered, the way she had felt, small, helpless, watching everything crumble. And in that moment she swore again, not him, not this time. Her body moved before thought. She lunged, covering the pair, shielding them with her own frame as bullets tore the air above. Dust showered her shoulders. Stone cracked inches away. Her breath ragged, her heart pounding. But her resolve unyielding. Because this was why she was here. Not medals, not recognition, not approval. For this. For them. For the promise made years ago. She rose again, rifle snapping up. Her shots tore through the smoke, each one deliberate, each one carrying the weight of her vow. And as the firefight raged, as the world around her screamed and shattered, she realized. Her silence was breaking. Not with words, not with speeches. With action. With resolve. With unshakable resolve. Why did the world slow down when chaos was at its loudest? Bullets tore past, Stone walls cracked, shouts echoed, and yet, inside her head, it was silent. She crouched low, rifle tight in her hands, smoke biting her eyes. The boy clung to his mother, his small frame pressed against her back for protection. Hall's voice cut through comms, hoarse, urgent. "Hold the line, keep them pinned." Pinned, that was the word, but she knew they weren't pinned. The squad was outnumbered, outflanked, fighting on the edge of collapse. Reinforcements hadn't arrived. Maybe they never would. Her lungs heaved. Her hands stayed steady, always steady. Diaz slid into cover beside her, his rifle smoking, his face streaked with dust and sweat. He shouted over the noise, "We can't hold this forever." She didn't answer, just rose, aimed, fired. A target dropped. Another pulled back. Smoke swallowed the space between them. Diaz pressed his shoulder to hers, close, grounding. "First time, huh?" His voice cracked, not mocking, not dismissive. Just human, raw, feels like hell because it is. She glanced at him, eyes hard. "We've both got reasons to be here." For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. He nodded once, sharp. Then he moved again, shouting into comms, firing bursts into the haze. Her ears rang, her throat burned, her pulse thundered. And still, she thought of her father. That night, the porch, the sirens, the neighbors whispering. She'd been 14, watching helplessly as everything she knew broke apart. The man who had raised her, stern, proud, flawed, taken away in handcuffs. Not because he was guilty, but because he'd been at the wrong place, wrong time. Because no one had believed him when it mattered. She remembered the silence after, the way no one spoke to her at school, the way teachers looked away. The uniform had come later, years later, but it had been born in that silence. She had sworn to carry herself where he couldn't, to stand where no one had stood for him. That promise pressed against her ribs now, heavy as armor. A burst of fire cracked overhead, snapping her back to the courtyard. Stone splinters rained. Someone screamed, a sharp, raw sound. She turned. One of the squad, Miller, was down. His leg twisted, blood pooling fast. He clawed at the ground, teeth clenched, trying to drag himself to cover. She didn't think, she moved. Bullets tore the air as she sprinted, boots skidding across dust. She dropped beside Miller, hooking her arm under his shoulder, hauling him up. His weight heavy, his blood soaking through her sleeve. "Go," he gasped, "leave me." She gritted her teeth. Not happening. Her muscles burned as she dragged him behind cover, every step agony, every heartbeat a risk. But she didn't stop, couldn't. They collapsed into shadow. Diaz was there instantly, dropping to his knees, hands pressing against the wound. Miller groaned, pale, sweat dripping. "Stay with me," Diaz muttered. "Don't you dare." She pressed her back to the wall, rifle up again, chest heaving. Hall's voice cracked through, "Status." Diaz shouted back, "Miller hit bad." Static, then Hall's voice again, low, harsh. "We hold no retreat." Her jaw tightened. Hold no retreat, with wounded, with civilians, with numbers against them. She felt the boy's eyes again, watching her, wide, terrified. In him she saw herself at 14, helpless. She couldn't let that happen again. Gunfire flared. She rose, firing bursts into the smoke. Her shots clean, precise, each one carrying that old vow. Time blurred. Minutes stretched. The courtyard became a furnace of noise and dust and blood. Then an explosion, closer this time. The wall at their flank cracked, stone collapsing, dust swallowing everything. Through the haze, shadows moved. Enemies breaching, pouring in. Hall roared, "Hold them, hold." Diaz cursed, dragging Miller deeper into cover. The boy screamed. The mother clutched him tighter. And she moved forward. Not back, forward. Rifle raised, breath steady. She fired, cutting through the smoke. One fell, another stumbled. A third rushed forward, too close. She slammed the butt of her rifle into his chest, pulled the trigger point blank. He dropped. Her hands shook now. Not from fear, from the fire building inside her, the vow burning hotter, louder. Her headset crackled. A new voice, the pilot. Extraction team delayed, you're on your own for now. Silence filled her chest, cold, heavy. On your own. She turned, eyes sweeping the squad. Diaz grim, hands bloody. Hall shouting orders, face lined with strain. Miller fatting fast, lips pale, the boy trembling, the mother whispering prayers. On your own. Her throat tightened, her chest ached. But her hands steady still. This was the moment. Not in training, not in briefing, not in silence. Here, now, when everything broke apart and only resolve remained. She raised her rifle again. And when she spoke, her voice was low, steady, unshakable. We hold. Diaz looked at her, eyes widening slightly. Hall turned, surprise flickering across his face. But she didn't wait for their approval. She only rose, stepped forward, and fired again. Because sometimes resolve wasn't loud. It wasn't speeches or orders. It was action, silent, fierce, unyielding. Bullets tore past, dust choked, blood spilled. And she held. She held with everything inside her, past, present, promise. For her father, for the boy, for herself. The mission had changed. This wasn't about intel. This wasn't about orders. This was survival. This was dignity. This was resolve. The courtyard stank of cordite and blood. Smoke curled through broken walls, floating in lazy spirals that mocked the violence below. The battle had slowed, not ended, like a storm shifting its weight before the next strike. She crouched, rifle pressed to her shoulder, eyes fixed on the smoke, her ears strained for movement, every second stretched like wire. Diaz muttered beside her, "We're bleeding out here." His hands were still clamped on Miller's leg, his face carved with exhaustion. Sweat dripped from his brow, streaking the dust. Hall moved along the line, voice hoarse but unbroken. Ammo check, reload, rotate your fire. He forced control into the chaos, his command still sharp despite the fatigue. She reloaded in silence, the motion automatic. Clip in, bolt back, breath steady, always steady. Her hands didn't tremble, but her body ached. Muscles tight, throat raw, eyes stung. Every nerve screamed for rest, for water, for air that didn't taste of fire, but none of that mattered, not now. The boy stirred, his small voice broke through. Are we going to die? The words landed heavier than the gunfire. The mother pulled him close, whispering comfort, her own tears streaking her face. Something inside her twisted. She wanted to speak, to promise, but promises broke too easily in places like this. She looked instead, just looked at the boy, her gaze firm, unshaking. No words, only resolve. And in that silence, something passed between them. He held her stare, then nodded, small and sharp, as if understanding. Hall barked again, dragging them back to reality. They'll push again, be ready. Diaz cursed under his breath. If they push with numbers, we're done. The mother flinched at his words. The boy squeezed tighter. Miller groaned, barely conscious now. The squad fractured in subtle ways. Fear seeped through the cracks. Each man and woman locked in their own thoughts, about death, about home, about how much longer they could last. And she felt it too, the weight pressing down, threatening to split her chest open. But then memory. Her father's face, his last words before being taken, hold your ground, never fold even when they tell you to. That vow rose again, sharper now, like a blade unsheathed. She moved forward toward Hall, his eyes snapped to her, brows furrowed. What? We can't just wait, her voice steady, quiet but unyielding. Hall scowled. Orders are to hold. Orders don't matter if we're all dead before they arrive. She kept her tone level. No challenge, just fact. For a moment Hall stared, anger flashing. But then doubt flickered. His gaze slid toward the wounded, toward the civilians. His jaw clenched. Diaz broke the silence. She's right. We stay pinned here, they'll bury us. We need to change position. Hall hesitated. Command weighed heavy. Responsibility carved deeper lines into his face. He had to choose, follow the book or survive. Finally he exhaled rough. Fine, but we move together. Something shifted then, not in the courtyard but inside the squad. Their eyes turned to her, not fully, not openly, but enough. Recognition. She had spoken what they all knew, what none had dared to say. It wasn't leadership she wanted, but it was pressing itself onto her shoulders, heavy, undeniable. The quiet kind, the kind no one asked for but everyone felt. She swallowed it down, turned her eyes back to the smoke. And then it came. A ripple of movement, shadows stirring, the enemy's second push. Positions, Hall roared. Gunfire erupted again. Bullets sparked off stone. Dust rose in choking waves. She fired precise, each shot carrying that vow. Diaz shouted, returning bursts. Hall moved like iron, voice cutting through. But the pressure mounted, more enemies this time, closer, faster. One broke through the line, charging toward the civilians. She didn't think, she launched forward, boots slamming into stone, rifle raised. A burst, 2 shots, he fell before reaching them. Her chest heaved, her ears rang, but her hands stayed steady. Another, Diaz shouted. 2 came this time. She pivoted, fired, hit 1. The second lunged. Time slowed. She swung, knife flashing from her belt, driving it forward. The blade struck. He crumpled. Her pulse thundered, her breath caught. She yanked the knife free, wiped it against her sleeve. And when she turned, she saw them watching. The squad, the boy, even Hall. Not words, not speeches, just action. Silent, fierce, unyielding. And it changed something. The squad straightened. Diaz's voice steadier now. Hall's orders sharper, louder. Even Miller, half-conscious, tried to grip his rifle again. Resolve spread, contagious. Born in silence, carried by example. The push slowed, the smoke thinned, the courtyard held. For now. But exhaustion pressed harder. Ammo ran low, water gone, strength fraying. They couldn't last much longer. Everyone knew it. And still they looked to her now in small glances, in half-turned eyes, not because she commanded, but because she endured. The boy, too, no longer trembled. He sat close to his mother, but his eyes stayed on her, watching every movement, every breath. She wasn't their leader, she hadn't asked to be. But she had become their resolve. And as the silence settled heavy again, she knew the storm wasn't over. It was only waiting. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire? The courtyard had quieted, but it wasn't peace. It was a pause, a cruel one. The kind that let every man and woman hear their heartbeat, taste the salt of sweat on their lips, feel the ache in muscles that wanted only to collapse. The smoke had thinned, revealing broken walls, shattered stone, dark stains where bodies had fallen. The air smelled of rusted iron and dust, mixed with something worse, something no one wanted to name. Diaz crouched near Miller, whispering low, "Stay with me, brother, just stay awake." His voice cracked, but he forced it steady. His hands pressed into bloody fabric, turning darker with every second. Hall leaned against the wall, his radio pressed to his ear. Static, only static, his jaw set tighter each time. She sat apart, rifle resting across her knees. Her hands finally trembled, not from fear, but from fatigue so deep it carved into her bones. She curled her fingers tighter around the weapon until the shaking eased. The boy's voice broke the silence again, small, fragile. "Why aren't they coming?" His mother hushed him, stroking his hair, her lips pale, eyes rimmed red. But the boy didn't look at her. He looked at the soldier, at the woman who had stepped forward when no one else had. And she had no answer. Her eyes shifted toward the radio in Hall's grip, still static, still silence. Reinforcements hadn't come. Maybe they wouldn't. A cold thought slid into her mind when she tried to push away. We are forgotten. Her breath caught, she fought it down, focus. Diaz's whisper turned harsher. He's slipping. Hall, we need evac now. Hall slammed the radio into the wall. "They're not answering." His voice cracked, loud, raw. For the first time they all looked broken, truly broken. And she felt it, fear flooding, gnawing, clawing. Her own chest tight, her own mind screaming to surrender, to give up, to stop fighting battles no one remembered. But then in that collapse of sound, in that moment where even Hall looked smaller than he was, her father's voice again. Not loud, just steady. "Never fold, even when they tell you to." Her jaw clenched, she rose. The squad turned, not with hope, not with expectation, just with eyes desperate for something to cling to. She spoke, voice hoarse, low, but cutting the silence. "We can't wait anymore." Diaz snapped back. "And do what? Run. Into what?" His anger wasn't at her. It was at the walls closing in, at the bleeding man in his arms, at the sky that wouldn't open. She met his glare without flinching. "Move or die here." Hall stepped forward. "You don't give orders." "No," she said steady. "I give choices." The words landed heavier than she expected. They hung in the air, caught in the smoke. The boy whispered, almost too soft to hear, "She's right." And somehow, that whisper shifted the weight again. Hall turned away, dragging a hand down his face. He looked at the civilians, at the wounded, at his team. His shoulders slumped, then stiffened. "All right," he muttered. "We move." Diaz cursed under his breath, then nodded, lips tight. They began to prepare. Weapons checked, magazines counted, straps pulled tighter. Each movement slow, deliberate, carved from exhaustion. She checked hers too. One magazine half full, another nearly spent, knife still wet with blood. Her fingers brushed the hilt, holding a little longer than needed. They would leave the courtyard, but into what? No one knew. The mother clutched her boy, whispering prayers. The boy clutched her hand, but his eyes never left the soldier. When they moved, it was into shadow. Walls jagged, alleys narrow, rubble crunching under boots. Every sound too loud, every corner too sharp. Hall led, Diaz carried Miller, she took rear. The weight of every eye pressed on her back. The streets were ghostly. Broken signs swung in the wind. Windows shattered, doors opened to nothing but darkness. Every breath tasted of ash. Then a sound. Footsteps not theirs. Hall froze, raised a hand. The squad dropped low. The sound grew louder, boots on stone. Voices, rough and foreign, carried on the night air. "Enemy close." Diaz hissed, "They're sweeping." Hall's jaw flexed. He signaled retreat into a ruined building. They filed inside, hearts hammering, breaths caught. The space was tight. Broken beams, collapsed ceiling, dust thick, shadows everywhere. The voices grew louder, closer. She pressed her back against the wall, rifle ready. The boy clung to his mother, small body trembling. Diaz shielded Miller, teeth bared. One enemy passed the doorway, then another, shadows shifting in the moonlight. She steadied her breath. If one looked inside, they were finished. Her pulse thundered so loud she feared it would give them away. Then a cough, soft, broken. Miller. Her stomach clenched. The enemy froze, head turned. Diaz's eyes widened. Before thought, before fear, she moved. Rifle raised. A single shot cracked through the night. The enemy dropped, body collapsing into the dirt. Shouts erupted outside, voices sharp, urgent. Hall roared, "Move!" Chaos, gunfire exploded. The squad pushed out, bullets sparking off walls. Diaz dragged Miller, Hall firing wild bursts. The mother stumbled, clutching her boy. She covered rear, rifle spitting, muzzle flash lighting her face in bursts. Adrenaline drowned fatigue, every shot precise, every movement survival. But the street ahead was longer than it looked. The enemies poured in behind, chasing, shouting, firing. Stone shattered near her head. She ducked, fired back, clipped one. Her legs burned, lungs tore, vision blurred, but she kept moving. Finally, an alley split left. Hall signaled. They dove, sliding into shadow, pressing against cold walls. Silence, shouts passed by, fading. They had escaped for now. The squad collapsed against the walls, gasping. Diaz dropped Miller gently, blood seeping whiter now. Hall pressed his head back, eyes shut. The mother sobbed quietly, holding her boy tight. And she stood there, rifle still raised, chest heaving, eyes burning. Not broken, not yet. But in the silence, one thought hammered louder than any gunfire. How much longer can I carry them? Why did her legs feel like they belonged to someone else? Each step through the ruined alley was heavier, slower. Her boots dragged against stone. Her chest ached with every breath. The rifle weighed double now, her arms trembling as if she carried not steel but the lives of everyone behind her. Hall walked ahead, shoulders hunched, movements stiff. He hadn't spoken since the alley escape. His silence carried more weight than his orders ever had. Diaz staggered, Miller slung across him. Every so often, Miller groaned, a sound that seemed to tear Diaz apart piece by piece. The mother whispered prayers as she walked, clutching her boy's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The boy no longer asked questions. He simply stared at the soldier, always at her. Her eyes flicked back again and again, watching their pace, their breath, their shadows against the walls, protecting with sight when strength faltered. But inside, she felt it breaking. Not just the body, the mind, the will. The thought she had buried since the first shot rang, maybe I can't do this, maybe I'm not enough. Her throat tightened, the doubts returned sharper, crueler. They see you as strong, but you're not. They'll all die because of you. Her boots stumbled. She caught herself, leaned against the wall. No one noticed except the boy. His gaze, wide, unblinking, caught her. She forced herself upright, steady, always steady, even when it wasn't real. Hall finally stopped at a collapsed structure. The roof half gone, walls cracked but enough to give cover. He signaled them in. They entered wordlessly, collapsing into corners. The silence inside was suffocating. Diaz lowered Miller, hands pressing hard into wounds that refused to close. His whisper cracked, "Stay with me, man, just stay." Miller's eyes fluttered open, glassy, unfocused. His lips moved. No sound, just air. Diaz's face broke. He pressed his forehead to Miller's, whispering a string of promises he couldn't keep. She turned away, throat burning. Hall sat with his back to the wall, radio limp in his hand. The static hissed softly, cruel in its uselessness. His eyes were hollow. The mother rocked her boy in silence. Her lips moved in prayer, but her eyes betrayed the truth, fear, raw and consuming. The soldier sat alone, rifle across her knees. She let her head fall back against cold stone, eyes shutting for a moment too long. Exhaustion dragged her down. Images flickered in the dark. Her father, the day he left, his voice in the doorway. Some weights don't feel fair, but you carry them anyway, because someone has to. Her mother's silence, too. Not a word of protest, not even when fear filled her eyes. Just a quiet nod as if she knew what life would demand. And now here she was, carrying weight not asked for, not deserved, but carried all the same. A sound snapped her eyes open. A cough shallow, ragged. Miller again. Diaz pressed down harder, but his hands were trembling now. He shook his head, tears carving lines through the grime. "I can't," he's slipping. She pushed forward, kneeling beside them, her hands pressed firm over Diaz's. "Look at me." Diaz's wild eyes lifted. "Breathe," she said, calm but sharp. "Keep pressure, he's still here." Diaz's breath caught. For a moment the rage in him stilled. He nodded, jaw tight, forcing his hand steady. Her own stayed there longer than needed, covering his, anchoring him. She didn't say it aloud, but inside, "You're not alone, none of us are." When she pulled back, Diaz kept his eyes locked on Miller, his voice steadier now. Hall's voice finally broke the silence. "We can't hold like this, we're running out of time." The squad lifted their heads, slow, weary. Hall's face was drawn, pale, his voice quieter than before. "We're not making it to dawn, not all of us." The mother gasped, covering her son's ears, but the boy had already heard. His small hands trembled. Diaz looked up, anger flashing. "Don't you say that, don't you?" Hall cut him off. "You know it too." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. The soldier felt it, the truth pressing heavy in the room, the reality they had skirted around all night. But then Hall's eyes met hers, not commanding, not challenging, just asking. And for the first time he said it out loud. "What do we do?" The room shifted with those words. Even Diaz froze, eyes flicking between them. The mother, the boy, they looked too. All of them waiting. Her chest tightened. She wanted to shake her head, to refuse. She wasn't built for this. She hadn't trained for command, hadn't asked for it. But their eyes held her. And suddenly the doubt that had screamed inside her all night went quiet. Not gone, just quieter. Her voice came out low, steady. "We move before dawn, find higher ground, signal again, we don't wait to die." No one argued, no one protested. Because sometimes resolve sounded like truth. Diaz nodded, sharp. Hall exhaled, closing his eyes for a moment before opening them with something steadier. The mother held her boy tighter, whispering that it would be all right. And the boy's eyes burned into hers, filled with something new. Not just trust, belief. She swallowed hard, looked away. The hours crawled after that. They tended wounds, shared what little water was left, sat in silence, each man and woman locked in their own private war. She stayed awake, couldn't let herself rest. Her eyes traced the cracks in the wall, the shifting shadows, the slow creep of moonlight. Her hands gripped the rifle tighter with every sound outside. Her pulse beat louder with every second. Dawn approached, faint light edged the sky. They rose slowly, painfully. Diaz lifted Miller again. Hall adjusted his rifle. The mother pulled her boy close. She took rear as always, the unspoken place. They stepped into the street, the ruins stretching endless before them. And she felt it, the storm coming, the final clash. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the doubt, something steadier lived now. Not strength, not heroics. Just resolve. And that, she thought, might be enough. Why was the morning so quiet? The sun hadn't fully risen, just a pale smear bleeding across the horizon, painting the broken city in shades of gray. The ruins looked softer in that light, almost gentle, as if the night's violence hadn't scarred them. But the silence was not peace. It was waiting. Every footstep crunched softly against rubble. Diaz staggered under Miller's weight, jaw clenched tight, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. Hall moved slower now, shoulders bent beneath invisible stone. The mother walked close, her boy pressed against her side, his small hand gripping her sleeve as though he might vanish if he let go. And behind them, always behind, she followed. Rifle steady, gaze sweeping shadows, every sense straining for movement. The higher ground Hall had chosen wasn't far. A crumbled tower at the city's edge, what once might have been a signal post. If they could reach it, maybe, just maybe, the radio might sing more than static. "Maybe." The boy whispered, "Is it safe there?" The mother hushed him, but his question lingered. None of them answered. The street narrowed into a corridor of half-fallen walls. She slowed, scanning, too quiet, too still. A sound pricked her ear, a pebble shifting, a breath where there shouldn't be one. Her hand shot up, fist closed, halt. The squad froze. Her eyes locked on a shadow by the broken arch ahead. A shape, wrong, still but wrong. Then movement. The first shot cracked, stone burst near her head. "Contact," she shouted, dropping to her knee, rifle barking in reply. The street erupted, bullets screamed, dust exploded. Hall dove for cover, dragging the civilians. Diaz pulled Miller behind a shattered cart, firing blind. She stayed in the open, cutting precise bursts into the smoke, every shot measured, every shot hers. The enemy poured in, shadows turning into bodies, rifles flashing. She pushed forward, step by step, keeping their eyes on her, pulling fire away from the others. A round clipped her shoulder, spinning her. Pain flared, sharp and blinding. She stumbled, teeth gritted, but didn't fall. Her rifle lifted again, her finger unyielding. Behind, Hall's voice shouted orders, Diaz roared curses. The boy cried out. But her world narrowed to one thing: hold them. For every step the enemy took, she forced them 2 steps back. Time fractured, minutes stretched into hours. The smell of cordite burned her lungs, her ears rang. Blood dampened her sleeve, sticky and warm. Then Diaz's shout cut through, "We're moving, cover." She nodded once, even though he couldn't see. Her rifle sang louder, faster, pushing them all toward the tower. Hall half-carried the mother, Diaz dragged Miller, the boy clung between them. Their footsteps pounded away, fatting. She stayed alone now, her shots slower, more deliberate, each one echoing with her father's voice. Never fold. But her magazine emptied. The click echoed like betrayal. She ejected, slammed in the last one, barely a handful of rounds. The enemy pressed closer, too many, too fast. Her breath steadied, her hands didn't shake. She fired until there was nothing left. Then silence. She lowered the rifle, chest heaving, blood dripping from her arm, dust thick around her. The enemy shouted, moving nearer. Her hand slid to the knife at her belt, fingers closed tight. She stood body straight, eyes burning. Not defiant, not angry, just resolute. She didn't see the flare in the sky, didn't hear the distant whir of engines, didn't see Hall's desperate hands slamming the signal into life on the tower above. She only saw the faces closing in, the rifles raised. And she thought of the boy, the way he looked at her, the way he had believed. Her lips curved, faint, almost a smile. And then light. Air split open with the roar of incoming fire. Explosions ripped the street apart. The enemy scattered, their shouts swallowed by thunder. Gunships streaked overhead, their shadows massive against the dawn. Reinforcements, late but not too late. The squad watched from the tower, eyes wide, breaths caught. Hall's hand still gripped the radio, Diaz's arms still wrapped around Miller, the mother's tears streaming, the boy's small hands pressed to the glass. They watched her stand there, dust swirling, smoke burning around her. Not broken, not bowed. Alive. The gunships cut the enemy down. Soldiers poured into the streets. The siege broke, the weight lifted. And yet when the dust cleared, when boots thundered past her, when hands reached to pull her toward safety, she barely moved. Her legs trembled, her chest heaved, but her eyes stayed steady. Because inside she knew the truth. She hadn't fought for survival. She hadn't endured for herself. She had carried the weight for them. For Diaz, for Hall, for Miller, for the mother, for the boy. For every soul who needed someone to stand when all else fell. And in that silence she understood. Strength wasn't loud, it wasn't glory. Sometimes strength was quiet. A woman in a uniform too heavy for her shoulders, a doubt carried like a scar, a vow whispered through blood and fire. And dignity, true dignity, didn't speak. It simply acted,